Welcome wanderers to Wanderlust Stories, where the world's most enchanting places meet the parts of us we'd rather not name. My name is Wanderlust, and today I'm taking you somewhere warm with edges, somewhere built on light and longing, and the soft ache of memory. Lisbon. This isn't a story about tiles or pastries. It's about the ghost I brought with me, zipped inside a bag I thought I needed to survive. I arrived on a late afternoon that looked like golden glass. The plane glided over the Tagus, and for a moment the river turned into a ribbon, bright and untouchable. When the doors opened, the air tasted faintly of salt and sugar. Outside, the taxis lined up like patient bees. I held my small bag close to my side, as if the strap were a hand. The city waited at the edge of the sky, quiet and listening. What if the place you chose to heal can hear your secrets before you say them? I took a yellow cab to Alfama. The streets narrowed until they were more stair than road. Laundry swayed between windows like flags of everyday life. Azulejos, those blue and white tiles, watched me as I passed, each one a tiny framed ocean. When we stopped, I climbed a last flight of stone steps and met a door the colour of tea. The key turned with a sigh. Inside, the apartment was simple and bright, with a balcony just wide enough for the soles of my feet and a view that slid down to the river. Church bells rang somewhere below, slow and certain, as if reminding the day to keep breathing. I set the bag on the small table by the window. I told myself I would not open it. Not yet. I made tea in a chipped white cup and stood by the balcony while the water cooled. A tram clanged in the distance. A woman laughed. A radio hummed with an old love song. A word floated through the room, uninvited and perfect. The kind of longing that holds your hand even as it lets you go. The bag is still closed, but it is already speaking. At sunset, I walked to a miradoro, one of those lookouts where the city spreads itself like a map and asks to be read slowly. Teenagers leaned against the railing and took pictures with the orange sky. A man with a guitar tested a melody and then committed. His voice was cracked and tender, the way paper sounds just before a flame catches. I told myself to relax, to feel the view, to let the river be a river and not a metaphor. But when I reached for that calm, my hand returned empty. I kept wandering. Down a flight of stairs, through an arch, along a street that seemed to move with its own pulse. A fado house had its door open. Inside, the light sat low. A woman sang without hurry. The notes were not begging to be loved. They were telling the truth and daring the room not to look away. I stood at the threshold and listened. Her voice reminded me of a feeling I had tried to avoid back home. The moment when you realize the leaving has already happened. And you are the last to know. I went back to the apartment gently. I promised myself I would sleep. I promised myself I would not touch the bag. I touched the bag. What did I think I had packed that the city did not already know? Inside, the usual things. A folded sweater. A book with a receipt for a bookmark. The old phone I could not quite bring myself to erase. At the bottom, a small pouch tied with a red ribbon. I had placed it there months ago, as if hiding were a cure. I loosened the ribbon, and the night stepped closer. Inside the pouch, small objects. A train ticket. A key that no longer opened anything. A letter I never sent. And a ring. I held it to the light. It caught the lamp and returned it, colder. The room went silent, the kind of silence you know is not empty. Someone in the alley coughed. The kettle clicked, realizing too late it had never been turned on. I placed the ring on the table and tried to breathe in a way that would not break me. The bag is no longer luggage. It is a door. I slept badly, if sleeping is what you call standing in a room inside your own head, while the past walks through it, touching things. In the morning, Lisbon was already moving. The old men at the cafe were arguing about football with the practiced grace of people who have argued about the same thing for 40 years. I ordered a coffee and a pastry and remembered how to be a person. The first bite flaked like soft snow, then gave me a sweetness that landed just behind my eyes. A small kindness. I stayed with it. I took tram 28 and let the city read me as I read it. We turned corners that had not been designed for turning. We passed clotheslines, plants in mismatched pots, a cat that blinked like a fortune teller. At one stop, A woman waved at no one, and did not seem sad about it. I got out near a church and followed the steps down toward the river. The Tagus lay there like a mirror, but it was not my face I could see. If grief is a tide, Lisbon is a shore that does not argue with the water. I sat on a stone bench and let the minutes arrange themselves. A gull laughed at something I didn't understand. The wind tasted like metal and oranges. I took out the letter I never sent. The paper had softened the way skin does after a long bath. I read what I had written long ago. I was surprised by my own voice. The person speaking was honest and kind, but also begging. I folded the letter and put it back without judgment. Not everything we write needs to survive us. Not every version of us needs to keep talking. On the second night, I walked to the waterfront where the bridge crosses the dark like a red thought. People biked past with lights that made brief constellations. Far out, a ferry moved like an eyelid. I could feel the ring in my pocket, warm from the heat of my hand. I told myself I carried it for history. The truth was simpler. I carried it because I still could. What do you hold on to when the thing you are holding is what is holding you? I heard footsteps behind me and turned. No one was there. The footsteps continued, not menacing, just insistent, like a memory trying to keep up. I stood very still and let them arrive. For a second, I felt a presence at my side, the shape of someone who once knew my breath well enough to count it in the dark. I did not speak. The presence did not speak. The river filled the silence with a language that did not need words. When I blinked, I was alone again, and the relief felt like loss, and the loss felt like relief. I went home the long way. I passed a window where someone was playing an old record. The singer's voice rose and fell like a hand placed gently on the back of your neck. At the apartment door, the key stuck, and then forgave me. I set the ring on the table and watched it watching me. I asked the room a question I had been avoiding. If I leave this here, will I still be myself? The answer does not arrive. The city answers instead. The days arrange themselves into small rituals. Morning coffee at the corner. A slow climb to a lookout I pretended I had not earned. Afternoons spent learning the city's patience, the way it allows time to pool in shadows and then spill into light when it is ready. I visited Belém and stood near the tower that has been watching the water longer than my family has been telling stories. A group of school children ran in a pattern only they understood. Their laughter braided the air. I touched the stone and felt how steady it was. I imagined a life like that. Not unhurt, just steady. That evening, I chose a different fado house. The room was narrow and generous at once. A woman sang again. Another voice. Another life poured without apology. The guitar moved like a river under her feet. I sat at a small table and kept my hands folded so I would not touch the ring. The song ended and the room exhaled together. When the applause faded, I realized my eyes were wet. Not from the story she sang, but from the one I would not yet let end. Healing is not a clean break. It is a series of soft permissions. On the fourth morning, the neighbor across the hall finally spoke to me. She was small and purposeful. A woman built of iron and lace. She pointed at my bag and asked if I was staying long. I told her I was leaving soon. She nodded as if this had always been true. Then she said something I still think about. Some bags are not for traveling, she said. Some bags are for unpacking. I thanked her and did not know how. When she left, the hallway held her words like a scent. I returned to the table and looked at the pouch with the red ribbon. I untied it again, slowly, and placed the objects in a line. The ticket, the key, the letter, the ring. I let each one sit in the air without the story I had been forcing upon it, without the promise, without the blame. What happens if the proof you carry no longer needs to prove anything? That night, I dreamed I was walking the city with no bag at all. My hands swung free at my sides. The streets knew me. The bells named the hours but did not demand I answer. When I woke, the bag was on the chair, the strap coiled like a sleeping animal. I made tea and watched the steam spin itself thin. By late afternoon, a wind had picked up from the river, playful at first, then sure. I took the line of objects and slipped them into my pocket, not as contraband, but as company. I walked down to the water and stood where the stones end, and the river begins to consider the sea. A boy threw crumbs to pigeons who could not agree. The sky turned the colour of apricots, then copper, then something I could not name. I took out the ring and held it at my palm's centre. It looked smaller than I remembered. It looked exactly the same. I thought of the day it was given, the light, the vows, the certainty that felt like a gift, then a cage, then a ghost. I closed my hand and opened it again. The ring did not change. I had hoped it would. Letting go is not the moment you release the object. It is the moment the object releases you. A woman stood a few feet away, leaning against the railing. She did not look at me, but she knew I was there. "The river takes what we cannot carry," she said, as if talking to the water. "It brings it back when we are ready." I nodded, though she had not asked for agreement. When I turned to thank her, she had already stepped away, swallowed by the soft noise of evening. I placed the ring on the stone wall beside me. I did not push it. I did not plead with it. I let the wind consider it. I let the light set it on fire. And then go. People passed. No one noticed. The ring sat like a coin on a shrine to a god I had stopped praying to. I waited for a sign. Nothing happened. The world continued, beautifully indifferent. Maybe the most honest part of grief is how little the world rearranges itself to accommodate us. I picked up the ring and held it one final time. I thought of the letter. I thought of the key. I thought of all the versions of me that had insisted the bag was the only thing keeping me intact. I understood suddenly that I could walk away with the ring and still be free. I could place it back in the pouch and still be brave. I could throw it into the river and still be haunted. The choosing was not the cure. The choosing was the mirror. So I did something smaller. I lowered the ring into the shallow water where waves kiss the stones and retreat. It rested there, a bright circle in a moving frame. The river reached for it and let it go, reached and let go. Like breathing. I watched until the light shifted and the circle blurred. When I finally stepped back, I felt lighter in a way that did not ask to be measured. I walked uphill without counting the steps. The city glowed in windows and doorways. Dinner happened behind curtains. Laughter climbed the walls. A tram sighed around a corner as if it had just remembered something funny. At the apartment, I closed the door and turned on the small lamp. The bag waited where I had left it. I opened it and found space where the weight had been. Not empty, just spacious. I sat at the table and untied the red ribbon one last time. I slipped the ticket into the book and closed it softly. I folded the letter and set it under the cup to keep it from curling. I placed the key on the windowsill where it could shine without purpose. I left the pouch in the bag and did not close the zipper. The night air moved through the room, curious and kind. Before bed, I stepped out to the narrow balcony and let the city hold me for a minute. A singer's voice drifted up from somewhere I could not see, and the word returned, the one the city had given me on the first night. Not a wound. Not exactly. More like a room you keep returning to, because the light falls just so. I will not say I was healed. I will not say the ghost left. I will say the ghost, and I learned how to walk the same street without stepping on each other's feet. I will say the bag became something else. Not a vault. Not a shrine. Just a bag. If this spoke to you, stay with me. In the next story, I'm going to open a different pocket. The one where momentum lives, quiet and stubborn, the rhythm beneath everything we do when the spark is gone. You've already felt it here. You were feeling it each time you kept listening. Meet me there next time. Bring only what you need. The city will carry the rest.